Boys and girls, your attention, please.
Hello and welcome back inside the Park for May for podcast number 911. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
A.K.A. Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on,
That's
Todd.
exactly what we do. We watch it, we talk about it, but before I talk about it, I have to go find somebody that knows what they're talking about racing. Now, some of the elite friends in Paul's circle say that his full name is Paul Ferradura Charsley. I don't know if that's true or not, but you know who it
Rip
is.
from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charsley, the International.
Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. So this is episode 911?
It is.
Okay, that's very apt for this race, isn't it? There's a lot of emergency stuff going on.
Yes, there was.
Emergency
I
trying
thought-
to fix cars, emergency vehicles on track, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. See, I thought you were going to go with the whole, being a race car driver, the whole Porsche 911 thing, but...
No, we don't talk about Porsche at our team.
Yeah, I bet you don't.
That's too soon,
bet
Todd.
you don't.
What the hell?
Yeah.
We were beaten by Porsche to 2 championships
know.
this year. Actually, 3 championships this year.
That's because Porsche pays off the BOP guys.
Evidently.
There you go. That's how
Evidently.
that works,
Yep,
Yeah, that's how
that's
that
what we're
works.
going with.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with that. I think
Yeah.
that's fitting. Although I know you're a fan. Come on, I know you're a fan of the original 917 Longtail.
Oh, yeah, 917s,
Yeah.
962s, 956s, all that stuff was
Yeah.
all in the wheelhouse, right? That was the Porsches were what my dad and my brother were running, all those years ago. I just went
Yeah.
a different way. I stuck to England.
That's right.
You
You were
know?
doing Vauxhall and
MG and Robin Reliant.
Austin Healey. Robin Reliant and the Austin Healey.
Hey,
yeah.
Triumph Dolomites. Yeah, all that stuff.
The Triumph. Yeah. There you go. That's good
Yeah.
for you. Did you? I got confused. It's a Sao Paulo Grand Prix.
Yeah.
I thought it was the Brazilian Grand Prix, but if you search hashtags, you couldn't find Sao Paulo Grand Prix really.
Interesting.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, well, I didn't
That's-
even know what
that's
the hell time it was going to start. So that was.
I know. Well, they ended up running qualifying in the blue hour. Right?
Yeah, that was fun.
That was fun.
I thought it's kind of the stuff we have to do half the time. Just
It is.
throw a little spanner in the works. They all had to get up early, and I thought that was good. I think it was a good change of pace there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Interlagos, it's a cool track, a historic track, recently resurfaced, but apparently, Paul, they just kind of repaved over the bumps.
Yeah, made them bigger bumps. Yeah.
No, we're not going to plane it. We're not
No,
gonna
why
plane
would
it
you do
flat.
that? That's expensive.
It's expensive, and don't you want that whole Sebring vibe? Come on. I'm not going to
Yikes.
plane that track.
But think of Paul Lewis and Paul Alonso, the old guys. They were taking a beating out there.
I know. Do you think we can afford earth movers? No. We're going to lay some bitumen down. We're done.
Yeah.
That's how they're going to do that. So anyway, yeah, that was a little bumpy. And then also, a couple talking points in our formation lap here, just to set the table, if you will. Kind of a slow virtual safety car call during the sprint that allowed McLaren to swap driver, because I got to be honest with you, Paul, as soon as that VSC came, or as soon as that crash happened, I thought, oh my gosh, they've tiptoed around hurting Oscar's feelings so long in this race. They should have just swapped it immediately and let Lando get as much as he could. But they tiptoed around the emotions. I thought they're going to get caught out. This VSC is coming now, and they won't be able to swap him. There's only a lap or two left. Right?
Yeah, ultimately they should have come a cropper for it. And as Grace rightly said, through our little text trees there was, it was the crash had happened. It should have happened. VSC should have happened right then and there. It was dangerous letting the cars go by there without that under. So yeah, and also on our little text, I'm like, I don't know what McLaren are doing.
I don't either.
The inevitable is that, Piastri has to let Norris by. That's the decision they made beforehand. Then they're all like fudging around. It's like, what are you fudging around? What are you waiting for exactly?
Right.
That's going to change what the outcome should be here. As soon as Norris had got like 1.7, I think, ahead of the car
Yep.
behind him, that's exactly when they should have switched. Instead of
Exactly.
they fart-assed around, and as I said, I'm
Yep.
really not sure for what gain. They wanted to
I
do it
don't either.
lots just so Oscar wouldn't feel bad about himself. It's like, you got to
Come
pull up
on.
your bootstraps here, people, and get on with the business.
Yeah.
That
As much
was
as I can
bad form.
appreciate, yeah, as much as I can appreciate, Mark Webber, telling his driver Oscar not to ever accept a number two and don't,
Yeah,
Mark had, let's face it, he had a butt full of that his whole career. And I get
right,
it. And
right.
I'm all for it. Right. But there's also a point in time when it's pretty much a foregone conclusion mathematically that Lando's the only shot you got at this point. Hand Oscar and Mark Webber a calculator and let them figure it out. But that's mathematically, that's about it, right? And so at some point now you just become an obstinate, unmovable object within the team. And that doesn't do well for your, vibe. I get it if you've got 2 Michelin-starred chefs and only one kitchen. But they ordered, scallops, and only one chef has scallops right now, and that's
Yeah.
Lando, right? So you got to
Yeah.
let him cook.
Yeah, it's if you have an agreement before the race, and hey, if Oscar said, "Hell no, I'm not doing it," then fine. That's the way you guys play. But because they'd had a
Right.
discussion about it, they knew that was inevitably Oscar had said he was going to do it. They should have just enacted that way earlier and avoided. I said they got away with it, which they shouldn't have.
They got away with it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what created a lot of noise on social media. A lot of Max and
Yeah.
Red Bull fans arguing that the delay, they were just waiting and waiting for McLaren to swap the drivers before they did their virtual safety car,
It
right?
seemed like that.
And as you've told me 1,000 times, you growing up around racing tracks and managing racing tracks and managing events on racing tracks your whole life, you literally, Paul, I don't believe there was anything nefarious in giving McLaren time to, I don't believe that. If you're a Max fan of Red Bull and you're worked up about it, I understand why you're worked up about it. I don't necessarily think that happened, but I go back to what you've told me a lot, is that they literally had Nico Hulkenberg out of the car standing on the track, and it was a hot track, and that's
Yeah.
a big no-no.
That is a big no-no. I mean,
Yeah.
what have we learned? Right? And I
Right.
mean, and
Right.
these activations are great. VSC is amazing. It shuts the cars down in pace immediately, so things can be attended to. And
Yeah.
and if you start ignoring that stuff, then we're going backwards here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't understand why it took so long. Yeah, I don't think the stewards are in there going, "We're going to get Max" or anything like that.
No.
I just think it was bad management of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like it. Max was furious about it, as he should be. That they, the delay, it should have immediately called it, would have given him a little more time to get into the qualifying. I'm talking about the qualifying session now. Would have given Max an opportunity to get out of Q2, and it caught him, Lewis, and Pierre Gasly out because the red flag wasn't immediately thrown. And Max was saying, "A car's in the wall, red flag."
Yeah, that's what they did in the bloody race. Why would you do it in that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he's got a point, and it's not because I think I'm not arguing so it would benefit Max. I'm arguing for just the safety of the track,
Right.
and you don't want drivers or people on that track, on a hot track, when there's something like that. So it's pretty dangerous. So
Yeah, it doesn't help
I
the
do
driver
think-
in peril or the
No.
marshals. That's
or the marshals. Yeah, it
even more
doesn't.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, just go back to Kyle Lamy, right?
Yeah.
With Tom Price. Whew.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't Google that and don't watch that, people. So anyway, I'm not arguing. I just do think that as you mentioned, we need to reconsider the process here. We're going backwards, and I think we need to consider that. They ended up postponing qualifying. This let the starting the session, as I mentioned, the blue hour on Sunday morning. They moved the race to a couple hours ahead to try to beat the forecasted coming rain in the late afternoon. And I do, in this case, I do go to say kudos to the FIA, F1, the teams, the race organizers, drivers, because as you know, Paul, That is a Herculean effort to do with all of the events, the sponsor events, the hospitality events, the team logistics,
the TV,
all of that.
around the world.
TV.
Yeah.
TV around the world to broadcast that. They broadcast that time, slot, right?
Yeah.
And to move a race like that, that's why a few years ago, I know that's what Formula One fans want. They want that alacrity out of F1 to be able to move and to get the race in. If it's going to be threatening weather, they can move it ahead. And I understand that's what fans want. But television broadcast packages and everything is on a timeline, right? All sponsored and hospitality and all of that is on a timeline. And to get all that to move is amazing, because that's what we were mad about, remember, a couple of years ago with Belgium, with that farcical 2-lap race. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's surprising that they did it, because usually they are immovable and they're steadfast. The time is the time, and that's what it is. It's all about the TV. So yes, kudos for them for being flexible with the qualifying, getting the qualifying in, not just abandoning it, and getting the race in at a decent thing that we could get a full race in. Yeah, but as you say, there's so many things that surround a Formula One race, both at the track, throughout the world, really. Even Hannah Grisham was doing a whole thing during the Brazilian Grand Prix with our race car on display at this fancy hotel in Phoenix, and all this had to change because the times are changing. Everyone there had to be alerted. You just imagine that, expand that around the world. That's a big deal. So
really
but I'm glad they did it. Definitely better to have a race at a different time and get a race in than have a race supposedly start at the proper time and not get a race in at all.
Yeah, exactly. So, a big applause to F1 for that. That was impressive, very impressive. I'm not quite sure what happened on the aborted start, Paul, but several drivers took off without a green light.
Yeah, because I sat in with Lando's car sitting there. Yeah, no one told him to go. He just went. So. Yeah,
that's what I was wondering if. Is an error on it, because the first half of the field just all kind of followed Lando for a second formation lap, and kudos to Max and all the drivers in the back. They were like, no green light, we're not going.
Right.
And they were right. As it turns out, they just fined him. So
I think a little leniency there. I think there was a lot of chaos that day, right? And with the crash and everything, I'm okay with that. Some other people wouldn't. They think it's manipulating for the championship. It doesn't really matter in the championship in the end. If it did matter in the championship, then maybe we would have had a bigger uproar about it. The Lando didn't get penalized points, and Max would have, vice versa, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I think the leniency was good because of the chaos that the whole weekend was in at that point, and then the chaos with Lance actually causing no start.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll get into that later. This is a different category. Let's start off at the sharp end. You had Red Bull, Sergio Perez, P11, Max Verstappen in P1. That happens to be their car numbers, too. Max started in P17 due to qualifying, and then he had that engine change. So he ended up qualifying, in 12th, ended up starting in 17th, had a lot of work to do. That all started off at the beginning, if I'm honest. He had a very good jump. He was up to P10 within a lap or two. Made some great moves up the inside, really diving down, Paul, into turn one on that inside. He said that when he was doing that, the camber of that corner kind of helped you out a little bit going into that, and really measured his way all the way back up. He scythed his way through the field, which was interesting to me because given the lack of pace on slicks during dry weather on Friday and through Saturday, they just didn't seem to be the fastest car out there. Clearly, that seemed to be McLaren. And but once that rain came, he got all the way up, and he just seemed to have that pace in the rain. He got all the way up in the top six. The team chose to leave him out during the VSC session, and this was the key moment of the race for track position. So they took track position. He and both Alpines stayed out. Your leaders came in. and that was the difference. Then the red flag came out, and that gave him the ability to box from P2, change tires, and then he came out a couple restarts and then got the jump on Ocon and then took off. He ended up finishing over 19 seconds in the lead, extended. So Lando left the circuit on Saturday night with a 44-point delta between he and Max. He left on Sunday night with a 62-point delta.
Yeah.
It's pretty tough, but a great drive. A lot of people are saying it was a masterclass, best of his career. It was really good. I don't know if I've seen some pretty good drives out of him. I don't know if I'd measure that pretty good, but it was pretty exceptional.
It was pretty exceptional for sure. I did a lot of riding around in his in-car camera, so I was trying to observe a little bit about what he did, certainly in the first lap, and then laps thereafter, and little differences on what he did. Obviously, the first lap got off the gate perfectly. No wheel spin. Some other cars were getting a lot of wheel spin there on the start, and lined himself up. So he obviously jumped about 2 rows just going in before he got into turn 1, then going around turn 3. The long left-hander, is that turn 3?
Yeah.
Lined up on the outside, which everyone, I still don't understand why people think, wow, we're completely thinking outside the box, because honestly, that's kind of normal thinking for rain driving. Is you obviously need to learn where the grip is. It's not always offline, but for the most part, there's a lot of grip offline in certain corners that you need to try and find either through testing or even on the outlaps for the race, things like that. And I'm sure that's exactly what Max was doing, and lining up on the, everyone's just kind of jammed up on the inside, and there's enough grip on the outside to even it out, and just went up around the outside of him. He didn't make any more moves after on that first lap, but obviously a lot of cars went behind him at that point. So 2 significant things, good start, and just moving on the other side of the track where usually in the rain, there's a bit more grip out there. Eventually when it dries out a little bit, you change it a little bit. And then on the left-hander, right before you go up the hill, he was taking so much more curb than anybody else. A lot of people avoid the curbs, usually logically so in the rain, because a wet curb is painted and it's slippery, but he was lining up his angle so he could cut the corner with his left front tire, and he could get a lot of exit speed coming out up the hill, and then just super impressive under brakes into 1. That's really where he made all of his passes in the end from so far back.
I'm wondering, Paul, if that wasn't because you remember there was a moment where they radioed him, said his front right was at the kind of max temp.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was that going over that curb, that you're going to slide over that, and that front right's going to take the abuse as it grips up.
Yeah, maybe so. It was definitely a significantly different line through that turn than other people were doing. Also, actually, before that, there's a tight right-hander before you head down the hill to the left, and he would come out and pinch the exit a little bit because he was getting more traction in the middle of the road than letting the car track all the way out. And that led him to a bit more pace going down the hill. And then obviously, as I said, he cut that inside apex super a lot compared to everybody else. So into 1, just the braking, I feel like he was modulating his brake pressure just to make sure he gets inside everybody, because he came from pretty far back. But it worked every time. And I think Piastri was just caught sleeping because how far back Max was when he actually made that pass. I mean, there's no way Piastri was out there to make life easy for Max. I think he had no thought in his mind that Max was going to actually be able to pull it off, but he did. So he definitely had a massive advantage there, just in that he figured out how to do it, and everyone else seemed to be floundering a little bit. Yeah,
it did. And he set, 17 fast laps?
Yeah.
He was motivated, wasn't he?
Overall the car seemed to have decent grip, but I think he then made a few different decisions that actually just exemplified that grip and gave him that big advantage that ended up being a 20-second lead when he started 17th. So, kudos to Max. It was an awesome display.
Yeah, exceptional race for him. Terrific. He was highly motivated. His first win since June, Paul.
Yeah, it was good. He was very excited, more emotional than he usually is right?
Yeah, he was.
I mean, which
Yeah,
is good
yeah.
because, I mean, you got to think, his last win, he thought they were just going to keep coming, as they have done the past 2 years. And then all of a
Yeah,
sudden,
right.
the pace of the car fell off, or the pace of the other cars picked up, and now become more of a struggle. So that length of time makes the winning all the more sweeter, I suppose. And it was good to see that he got just naturally emotional rather than his normal clinical self, perhaps.
Yeah, right. Then you got Sergio Perez.
You like my bass? You like it?
Ooh, tough day for him in the saddle. Spun early on, made his way back towards the top 10
Sorta.
at least. Then he lost out in that battle with Lawson. That was interesting. Lawson's like, no, dude. That's my seat. It's not going to pass me. No.
In fact, leave the
and
keys
then-
in the car because I'm going to have it next race.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. And then that battle actually cost him. Lewis very opportunistic.
Yeah.
Lewis is basically driving a greased pig at this point, but still, that last probably third of the race, Lewis did kind of come on song a little bit. I think he was just driving his heart out, and he got around Sergio. So Sergio dropped down P11 and out of the points. So
Yeah. What do you do about Sergio? I mean,
Nothing.
I know what I would do.
yeah,
but
well, yeah, but the only thing I consume, Paul, is I thought Mexico might be his last race, and the reality of it is,
Yeah.
if he's not out in the next race, I would say that's probably because the contract won't allow for it.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I think maybe it's because it's such a quick succession to get someone else ready. Might not have been in their minds thought to be enough lead time. Yeah, I mean, I would not have him in for the US race. I mean, he's basically cost this team the manufacturers championship, which is
Yeah,
a hefty sum, as we know. I mean,
yes, we do.
He's so many points behind Max that
Yeah.
it's the obvious bone of contention there.
Yeah, for sure.
Bone of contention, but there's also all that talk about Colapinto going to be signed to Red Bull and whatever. I don't. If they do that, then they're as stupid as they have been keeping Perez on. Honestly, if they think
that would not be my
Colapinto,
move.
no, I mean Colapinto's obviously shown himself to be a good Formula One driver with a lot, of potential, but he's not done anything as special as I think what Lawson's done.
No.
I mean,
No.
if they're thinking Colapinto could go to, the V-Carb, absolutely, I'd be all before that. But I think
That would make sense.
What Lawson's done and shows week after week is that he deserves that seat alongside Max. The question is, does Max want Lawson alongside him? Because Lawson isn't the softest individual, as most of them down south behave, right? I mean, so I mean, the potential of them not getting along and having some aggravation later in is probably high, but Red Bull need to figure that out because they've got a good driver that could support the manufacturer's title next year already in their group. They don't have to seek outside the group, and definitely I don't think
agree.
Colapinto is ready for prime time yet, as he showed
No,
this weekend.
I don't either. No, as he showed this weekend, I don't think so either. I think Liam's the guy. Liam,
Yeah.
hadn't driven that car in a long time. Has jumped in, has done an amazing job. I think come Las Vegas, you could take Perez out of that car, put Liam in there, and he'd score points.
I believe so. I believe so. Yeah.
And I put my money on that one.
Yeah.
And he's the guy to do it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, Lawson is a Red Bull type of antagonistic driver, right? I mean, remember Max when he was 17, 18? I see very big similarities between those two guys, quite honestly.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. Yeah, Liam's not there. He's there to knock feet off dust too. So, he's kind of it's kind of like Oscar. Kind of in the same cloth. So yeah, that would be my move. It was me. But anyway, let's talk about Alpine, shall we? You had Pierre Gasly in P3, Esteban Ocon P2. Esteban started P4. And Pierre, like Max and Lewis, got caught out during qualifying by the red flag, so he started down in P13. So you had two Alpines, one starting in P4, one down in P13. Ocon, like Max, decided not to box during the first virtual safety car, and he ends up taking the race lead as everybody else boxes. Now, this was critical for Esteban and Pierre to choose that strategy and go track position over fresh tires. And because Pierre also didn't box, he ended up moving up to P3. So you had Ocon, Max, and then Pierre as the red flag came out. The duel looked really good for potentially a 1-2, 1-3, something like that. But Max did get a second shot at the restart, got another safety car, got around Esteban for the lead. But I think both, Paul, as you watch both those drivers, there were some good battles. Pierre, kind of gunning through the field, holding off. He held off. Who was it?
Leclerc?
George Russell.
Yeah, George Russell.
Yeah, he had George Russell. He held him off. I thought both Pierre and Esteban did a really good job of driving, defending those positions, holding those positions under that kind of pressure. And in that kind of weather, in that kind of car, I think it's a fantastic result for the team.
It really is. It was a fantastic qualifying. I mean, Pierre's been showing some good pace recently, not so much Ocon.
Yeah.
So the car's definitely been improving anyway. And then obviously in these conditions, it seemed to really shine, and they made the most of it. I mean, there's a lot of pressure for them, especially in those closing laps. It must have been. I mean, it wasn't easy sailing by them. Ocon was leading for a while with Max behind him, and there was a measured gap there. But I'm sure Max was playing the game of tire preservation at that point. He didn't see the need to push that point and wait for the race to evolve, whatever, because obviously once they got the new set of tires on, Max, had pace on everybody, really. I think he was just being patient at that point. But can't take anything away from Ocon or Gasly at all. As I said, the car's been getting better. They did a great job. They didn't crack under the pressure. The team called the strategy great. One thing I'm thinking of is that Renault engine. I know it's not long for this world, but there's differences in engines where you make power. Sometimes it's peaky power. Maybe this Renault engine is a bit more user friendly for the driver. The power delivery comes in softer a little bit, maybe because it has less power. I don't know, but that obviously would help you in rain conditions, controlling rear slip, etc. So sometimes an engine with a little less power but more depth in it is actually a faster option in more slippery conditions.
Yeah, it's a great point. And Pierre had he was Russell was a second or he was within a second there towards the end, the last few laps, and Pierre did a heck of a good job holding George off. George incredibly motivated to get back up to the podium after having led. So it was a great run. And I know they said this in the broadcast, but I do think it's worth mentioning in the podcast that it's a massive haul of points that moved this team from 9th in the Constructors' Championship all the way up to 6th. If they can hold on to 6th for 3 more races, this will have been a $50 million race for Alpine. I mean, that's
crazy.
Now, I agree it's a tall order because there's only a handful of points now between them, Haas, and RB. Right?
It's close.
And there's 3 more races, and I get it. I'm not getting too excited, but that's their motivation. Holding on to that 6th, this could be a $50 million payday by what Esteban and Pierre did. And that's just, if you wonder what's left to watch in Formula One, Max is going to win it. It's stuff like this that I get really jazzed about, especially for Alpine. I mean, they've taken it in the shorts all year long. I mean, we've kicked them in the shins all year long.
Yeah.
And this is a great result. I could not be happier for them.
It really is. I mean, the manufacturers' battles all the way through the field are fun to watch. I don't know how do you make them more sexy for everybody? To pay attention to them. I mean, because you look at you got your English Premiership, you got your Manchester United, your cities, whatever. Everyone is behind the team thing. They're not, whoever's got the most goals over the season is kind of a side thing. It's all about how the whole team came together and won matches and went up. A bit more of that mentality in Formula One would be good, because I think that a lot of people are missing, the edgy, on the seedier pants, kind of watching the races, seeing what's going to happen. And this was like turned everything upside down, this race with the Alpine result. Yeah. It
did. I was just on my edge of my seat. It's like, come on, Pierre, hanging there.
Yeah.
And and I'm a Ferrari fan, for crying out loud. But is impressed in everything I was with Max and the return to the win and the exceptional drive for the win. I was more excited about Alpine, because I just think this team, of all the teams, them and Sauber desperately need a result. And Alpine got it. And
they did.
And they couldn't be happier for them.
Yep, they deserved it too. So.
Yeah, they really did.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Let's talk about Mercedes. What? Lewis Hamilton, P10, George Russell, P4. George had a very good start, jumped Lando for the lead at turn 1. He, like Lando, though, chose to box during the first virtual safety car, but the session ended just as they were coming in, Paul, and they lost track position to Max and the Alpines. Now, George, on the radio, not happy. He wanted to stay out. He wasn't happy with the decision, and once the red flag came out, ultimately, here's the thing, and this is, he did. He was mad, and I get it. And Lando wasn't happy either, and I get it. Although Lando was on the radio prior to coming into the virtual safety car saying his tires were worn and we should box for undercut and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So, I think Lando is more on record of wanting to box than George was. But the point of this is, and I understand it, but you're the sporting manager for a racing team, for crying out loud. You know strategy better than I do. But I got to think, Paul, it's one of those gambles. It's a strategy call that's probably more on the conservative side. The rain is going to get heavier. They're on very worn inters. If they box now under the virtual safety car or thereabouts, get fresh inters on, then as the heavier rain comes out, Max and the two Alpines are going to be on worn. You should be looking good, right? Mm-hmm. If that and had that been the case, I think they would have been in the catbird seat. However, then you can second guess that and say, but the race strategist should have known that heavier rain is more likely to prompt a red flag or a crash. Yeah. So maybe not. But I understand what they were doing and why. So I'm not knocking them on that. It's like anything else, Paul. We've said it 1,000 times about safety cars and red flags. Every time a safety car or a red flag, there's always a winner and there's always a loser.
Yeah, exactly. The logical call was exactly what McLaren and Mercedes did in their position. The roll in the dice call was what the Alpines and Max did. I mean, how do you predict a red flag? I get, it's going to get rainy, but a red flag has to be a pretty big crash. A VSC and a safety car, that that's more likely. So I think their call was fine. I thought the other call was fine too, because they didn't have anything to lose at that point, and so and it worked out for them. And sometimes it does, and you're right, sometimes it really doesn't. We definitely have been on both sides of things with the in the endurance racing stuff, where we've made a call and all of a sudden we win the race. Happened at Watkins Glen this year. We're on the right tires at the right time, and other times you end up fighting to stay on the lead lap, which has happened also this year. But I don't like to remember that stuff. But yeah, it does happen. You just try to make your best judgment call, and you can't get angry at the team for making that kind of call, I don't think, George. It's upsetting, but you can't say that he was, in the right and they're in the wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a logical call, and it just, there's winners and losers, and as Lando was saying, a lot of, the British press made a lot about Lando trying to make it sound like he was slamming Max, that Max didn't win on talent. It just won because he was lucky and that kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know that I read his comments exactly that way. I think I read them as saying what you and I are saying, Paul, that, you gamble and sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not.
Yep.
And they won because the luck went their way.
It did.
And, It wasn't
Yeah.
just like sheer talent, like we were going hammer and tong, wheel to wheel. It was just the luck of a strategy call.
Yeah, and for the good of the sport and safety, you have to have these things implemented: red flags, VSCs, safety cars, etc. The old days you drove around, the body's in the middle of the road. That's not the way we want to go back to. But with those things being enacted, you are going to have winners and losers. You just have to accept the fact and hope they all evens out in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Lewis, tough weekend for him. Said that it was the worst car he's felt all year long. A bunch of Team LH44 folks were on social media blaming the team, saying that they've abandoned him and they're trying to, it's just a bunch of crap. The fact is, I know, it's just, come on, people. Lewis managed to pass Perez late for a final point on offer, despite saying that it was the toughest race of the season for him. I think it was a very difficult car, and his onboards would clearly show you he was just chasing the rear end of that thing around all day.
Yeah.
It's very tough. Mercedes, go ahead. Let's talk about the race, and I'll talk about the tire pressure thing.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to figure out what was wrong. I guess the setup was different from George, because obviously George wasn't showing anything crazy. I mean, he said there was a lot of bottoming at the beginning, which obviously meant the car was set pretty low, and that's probably why in the second half of the race he was able to perform a little better, because the fuel load lightens, the ride height actually raises, and it becomes a bit more pliable, so to speak, got a bit more travel in there. So
he did look much better at the last half of the race.
That's why I'd associate with just the ride height was too low. Can't do anything about it at that point. And, just the fuel load lightened and made it eased it up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Mercedes was caught changing tire pressures with their wheels. The wheels were secure to the car. They can't do that during the aborted start. So there was a 10-minute pause. The mechanics came back out. The wheels were on the car and they changed the tire pressures. It was really strange. The FI looked at it. They ended up just fining them, but you can't do that. And they were saying, well, but it was a hectic time and the gates were so far away and the mechanics had to really hustle to get down there and they didn't have time. And it was like a bunch of apologies about it. And then the odd thing about the whole statement that the stewards made was, so we're not going to pay it. We're just going to fine them. But this is not a precedent for future races. Well, if it's not to be a precedent for future races, meaning that in future races people would get penalized, then maybe you should penalize them here. I don't understand what Johnny Herbert was doing there.
Yeah, it's
surprised he didn't penalize Max.
I'll have to use those excuses up if we get caught doing something one day.
Right, you should.
Yeah, no, it was a long way to the long way. It was. I could barely see it. I was tired. I had to get up early.
Yeah, so, mechanics have been working for 14 hours. We're all dog-eared.
Yeah. Generally, they don't have that latitude. The rules are the rules, but there you go.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk about Ferrari.
Hello.
Poor Ricky.
No, it cannot be, Ricky.
Poor Ricky. I just feel sorry for Ricky. Yeah. You said Carlos sounded like the out of office space.
Yeah.
I was told that I could.
Where's my stapler, Ricky? Where is it?
I could listen to the radio at a reasonable volume. Yeah. Poor Ricky. Carlos is always just on Ricky, isn't he?
Yeah. It was a bad weekend for Carlos. Unfortunately, coming off a great weekend.
After a win.
Yeah. What's funny is, it's not funny for anybody. Well, certainly not them. Is that most of the people that crashed in qualifying ended up crashing in the race.
Yeah, right.
You had Lance. Right. You had Colapinto. You had Sainz. Who else crashed?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Kind of followed suit from there. From a bad morning to a bad afternoon for most of those.
Oh, man. It was. Yeah. Carlos DNF, like four other drivers, he spun off the track twice. The last time he ended up in the wall, that ended his race. It was pretty much over there. He started from pit lane, so it wasn't like it was going to be a massive points haul for him anyway, I think. Charles started sixth, held off Max for quite a while, which is with some handy defensive driving, which is kind of impressive because not a lot of people did hold Max off during the race, and he did. he boxed early for inters and then had a couple runoffs. He said he just, there was a lot of reasons for it. The car was not good. It didn't have the balance. I don't know if they misplaced their race-winning pace in one of the Connex containers and got lost from Mexico or what was going on, but just clearly did not have the pace. When he boxed for that, he came out in traffic, very difficult for him to get around. Not quite sure what happened there, but I thought, as a Ferrari fan, I thought, okay, so maybe the pace there isn't there, hot weather, dry, slicks, maybe the rain. Maybe they'll have some pace in the rain like Max ultimately did, but that just didn't come to fruition either. I think it was
you couldn't have two opposing tracks, really, Mexico to Brazil, really.
Yeah, true.
When you look at them.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
So it doesn't always transfer from race to race to race because of the differential in tracks and how things work. But
I just think this track
wasn't their finest hour.
Yeah, this track was just not
friendly. Not friendly.
Yeah.
Not friendly to the Ferraris.
Although I picked Leclerc to win before the race weekend. But,
did you? Oh, yeah. I had Lando, Oscar, and Leclerc. So I picked. Gosh, McLaren, you're really letting this Ferrari fan down. Stop it. So anyway, let's talk about McLaren, shall we? We'll start off with Lando Norris.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, man. Tough weekend for Lando. He ends up down at P6, Oscar Piastri in P8. Lando started from pole position, but things kind of went south from there, Paul. Didn't get the best of starts. Let's back up. He started, had the aborted start, and then he just went again. And he and a whole gaggle of cars just decided, screw it, we'll do another formation lap. So they went around and did another, and there was no green light. Apparently, that's just worth a penalty too. So fair enough. So that was an unscheduled formation lap. And so I didn't know if the team told him to do that. You didn't hear the team to do that. I'm assuming he just kind of did it on his own.
Yeah, I purposefully went in the car or in the camera and didn't hear anything. He just went.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, fair enough. It was a confusing weekend. So, and that, I mean, I was as confused as anyone with Lance Stroll at that point. So, I mean, I get it. I'm not picking on Lando. He then lost the lead to George off the start at turn one. That was tough. Spent quite a while behind him. Then he, like George, boxed during the first virtual safety car, lost that track position to Max and the Alpines. That was tough. He then got around Russell, but then heavier rain came. It came down harder. He lost a spot running wide. He ran wide a couple times. Couldn't get back up to George or Charles and ended up down at P6. He said, there's a couple errors on his part, luck on the strategy. It kind of is what it is. He took it on the chin like a pro. I thought after the race, he could have been throwing the toys out of the pram, but I think he just kind of realizes, that's just how it went. The strategy went that way, and he had a couple errors, and he was trying everything he could, but tough weekend for him.
Yeah, it was, and it looked great going into the race, right? I mean, it couldn't have been better set up for him to make a major gain on Max's deal, I think.
I know.
He didn't drive great. He made mistakes. So it wasn't like all the world was against him. He was in control of some of those things that happened. But ultimately, the strategy calls are what they are. He can't do anything about that. And he doesn't do great in changeable condition races. It doesn't seem sometimes. If you remember, I can't remember where we nearly won his first race and it all went to pot. But It's a shame. I mean, it was a long shot anyway, and now it's pretty much a no shot. So now now at least he can get down to business and just start not being hampered by that on his neck, I guess. But
they just need to consolidate the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, I mean that's
at this point, but
massive. It's massive.
That's the big money. It is massive. Yeah. Oscar, another tough race for him too, finishing P8 again. He hit Lawson. Spun Lawson around. That gained a 10-second penalty. That was tough. He didn't serve it, so it ended up tacked onto the end. Oscar got ahead of Lando at one point, but then ceded that position when the team asked him to, and they asked him a lot quicker than they did during the sprint, which I think a lesson learned there. I don't know, Andrea. I don't know. I have my reservations. Oscar said he just lacked pace in these conditions. Just didn't have pace, didn't have the grip. Difficult race for him too. So yeah, I'm with you. I think I don't know if the new wing had something to do with kind of the performance drop off in the rain, whereas during the drive for the sprint, that new wing seemed to really pay dividends. They really looked like they were in the catbird seat coming out of that qualifying, coming in out of that sprint. Then you get into all that rain, and pace is quite a bit different.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the car didn't look great. It didn't look like didn't have a lot of grip. Norris was doing okay with it. Piastri obviously was doing average with it, I feel. They were running big wing, I guess, which should ultimately give you... Especially in some of those bad conditions, but it just didn't work out for them. I think maybe they had too stiff a spring or something like that, but it definitely didn't look like it was complying itself to the slippery conditions where the Red Bull was, head and shoulders above everyone in that kind of condition.
Yeah, it really was. Let's see. We get down to RB at Liam Lawson in P9, Yuki Tsunoda P7. Yuki and Liam both had really good qualifying results, and Yuki capitalized on that, running in P3 early on, Paul, looking great. Yep. Running out front. His pace looked good that first stint, but then he boxed for full wets as the rains got heavier. And I thought, this could be an interesting strategy. He could come out, have more pace as the rain really started to pile on. But the red flag came out and negated any sort of advantage those full wets might have given him, and everybody else got a free tire change. So it didn't really come to fruition, unfortunately. And then it seems like to me, after the red flag for the second half of the race, he just didn't seem to have the pace that he had in the first part. He ended up finishing down to P7. It's not bad, but I'm sure he wanted to finish higher, and it just didn't seem to quite have the pace in the second half that he had in the first.
Right. Obviously, the cars, the way they're set up, full tanks, when the tanks get lighter, they can change their characteristics a lot. I actually thought the red flag saved them because everyone stays away from.
You didn't think the full
wets.
wet was gonna?
I think it would may have been good for a lap or two.
Yeah, a couple laps.
If it stops you from crashing, great. But there's no way of identifying that's the case. But I didn't think the way it panned out that it was actually going to be good. So when they stopped the race, they were able to put the inters back on. I think they actually saved their race in the end.
That's interesting. Yeah, because they all avoid that. They avoid that full wet like the plague.
They do.
Yeah, they don't like it. Even Lewis, during that interview, walks up to Stefano Domenicali, who was announcing the postponement of qualifying. Lewis said, "Hey, it's fine. You should send us out." He said, "Just give us better full wets and tire blankets, and let's go." So he made a pretty good point. So kudos to Lewis for that, because I think that's what all the drivers would want. And for Liam's side, Liam got mugged 3 times. Once by Piastri, which spun him around. Another time by Ali Behrman, which got Ali a penalty. And then yet another time he got clouded by Lewis. It just kind of looked like Lewis didn't know he was down on the inside of turn 1 and turned in on him. Yeah. This dropped him down the order. But he hung in there. He fought hard, put in some good defensive driving against Lewis later in the race, and was able to hold Lewis off to come home in the points in P9. So yet, another terrific race by Liam, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And he doesn't give up. And it just shows you may think it's a foregone conclusion when Perez is behind you that, you give up the position or, well, he's caught me so he can pass me. Well, that was only good for a couple of laps. And then Perez, disappeared from his mirrors and he was able to hold the position all the way to the finish line. I think it's tenacity. It's never given up. And don't let anyone push you around kind of business. And I think he's doing a great job, as well as driving the car quickly in a forward direction. So I got nothing but praise for him at this race. Really, he's going to be something in the future. When right now it's a bit more under the radar when it's for a 7th place or whatever. But when we get up front with the guys that are up front now, and he's fighting for a win potentially if he gets to be in the Red Bull, it's going to be quite an added personality to the group, I would say.
Yeah, these were really tough conditions, and I think one of the positives out of this is that the 2 other rookies crashed. He didn't.
Right.
And he was damn competitive all day long, and I think that bodes well. Let's see. Let's talk about Haas.
Oh no, it all went wrong.
Tough weekend for Haas. You had Hulkenberg disqualified. Didn't finish the race, and then Ollie Behrman in P12. Haas, like Ferrari, seemed to have lost their pace in the shipping containers from Mexico. I don't know what happened. They looked really good the last few races. They came here, just didn't seem to have the pace. They were out in Q1 during qualifying. Kevin Magnussen must have had the same dodgy fish tacos in Mexico as Fernando did. So he was out of the car. Ollie Behrman stood in. I think did a great job. I'm not knocking Ollie. Got a little ragged during the race, but really that sprint, the qualifying and everything, I think Ollie did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And it kind of seemed like they may turn things around. You know, they got there, got through the sprint, and then they got the qualifying, and I thought maybe they can kind of turn things around in the race, but it all went pear-shaped from there, Paul. They just the thumb of fate just jammed down on him. You had Ollie, he got that 10-second penalty for hitting Lawson. Then Nico ran wide, got high-centered on the drain cover. The marshals pushed him off of it, which you can't do, so they disqualified him during the red flag. This left Ollie trying to carry the flag for the team as the sole Haas, and he and Joe went off right before the restart behind the safety car, and then he ran off again on his own, and then managed to bring it home in P12 with no further incidents. But it's ultimately it's a performance that reminds us that he's a rookie, right?
Yeah,
It's a tall order to put him in that car in this kind of conditions, expect something, out of such a chaotic race like this, to expect him to finish on the podium. That's a tall order.
Yeah, I think, there's been a lot of talk about the new rookies coming in, and they're listening to a lot of hype coming into their ears. Oh, Behrman, he's in a Ferrari, or, Colapinto, he should be running with Max. And I think everyone's getting a little bit ahead of themselves here, and I think that can, in their head, that can make the expectations of what they're supposed to do on a race weekend basis a bit warped from what potentially they should be able to do.
Yeah.
And I think certainly, that's where the scrappy races come from. Behrman's out there trying to, charge through the field like Max Verstappen, but it's like it's only your third race or whatever it is, and there's no chumps out there you're racing against. You're not going to make mincemeat out of them. And but the hype is big, and they're trying to live up to what these people keep saying to him, And I think it kind of showed itself in this race, both for Behrman, who I think actually did a pretty good job. His pace was good.
I do too.
I think the penalty was a little harsh. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been a penalty of some kind, but 10 seconds I thought was a bit harsh.
That's a bit harsh.
Yeah, and then Colapinto, obviously he made that error in the worst conditions that were out there, and he had a lot of hype for him over this weekend because he's the
lots of
adopted Brazilian driver at this point, I guess.
No, yeah. A lot of fans, a lot of Argentines there. Yeah, which is great to see.
It is. But let's measure our expectations a little bit. Give these guys a little chance to blossom, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. You had Sauber, Valtteri Bottas in P13, Joke 1, UP15. Valtteri started 11th, not a bad qualifying, which is pretty good for the Sauber. Lost a few places to much quicker cars, but despite battling hard on the balance of it, I think it was a pretty good performance by Valtteri. But, there again, you just... you bite your cheek because with 5 cars out of the race, they still couldn't score a point. It's like,
this was their chance, right? And everyone's saying, well, everything, even Ocon's like, well, everything's even in the rain conditions. Well, unless you're driving a Sauber, unfortunately.
Yeah, right.
And it's still a piece of junk. But I feel bad for those guys. I really do. And,
I do too.
I didn't see any women with the stake racing jackets on this week. I don't think anyone showed up. So
no, I don't think so.
It's a tough. They're just winding out the days here at this point.
It is. Joe ran off behind the safety car like Ollie did at the restart, tumbled down the order, and he struggled to recover from there. Joe said it was interesting. He said that he didn't know why, but with these tires on that car, it took a good 10 to 15 laps for those tires to finally come in to the window. And that you got to think about it on a restart. If it took him 10 to 15 laps to get some heat in those tires, I mean, he's a sitting duck.
So evidently that car needs a little downforce. Let's put it that way.
Apparently. Yes. Let's see. Let's talk about Aston Martin, shall we? That's a different category.
This is painful.
Lance did not start the race. Well, yes, he didn't. He started the formation lap, but did not start the race. Fernando Alonso, P14. So having crashed both cars in qualifying, a big hat tip to the team, Paul, because they were able to get both those cars put back together in a very, very short period of time. So big kudos to the men and women Aston Martin. You guys, not all heroes wear capes, Paul, but they do wear Aston Martin green, as it turns out.
Yeah, that
so
was miraculous. Very good job.
Yeah, it was amazing. Amazing job by them to put them back together. Ultimately, though, Lance ran off track on the formation lap, said that he thought there was a brake issue. They got to look at it. I think the team may have alluded to, or Fernando may have alluded to, some brake issues too. It did look weird because he was just come down and boom, the back end just snapped out. You know, it was like Karun snap oversteer Chandok there. Don't get me started. And so anyway. But the strange thing is that he stopped. He was stopped there. He started to back up. I'm not quite sure I understand why he just decided to give her some welly and try to drive over the gravel.
Yeah.
He got beached and it was game over.
I don't know. Maybe
there was an escape rope down further.
Yeah, I don't think that escape rope gets you back, but
it may not. But he could have backed up.
Yeah, he definitely could have backed up. The engineer was telling him to back up, and for some reason, he backed up a little bit and then went forward and then just drove right into the gravel trap, which is ultimately what ended his day. I think there must have been something going on in the braking, whether they weren't warmed up properly. There was a mismatch in temperatures, but it definitely, just pivoted on that right rear tire under braking there for 4. So I'm not sure that I'd blame the incident on Lance, just him not being able to make it back to the pit lane. You got to kind of blame it on him, but also remember when you're sitting in those cars, you're really low, and the gravel trap is here, and I don't know. I think he just lost his bearings on where he was and where he was going. Definitely could have got that car back to the pit lane and started the race though if you hadn't driven it. A little embarrassing, I would say.
Yeah,
unfortunate.
it is.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate. Fernando looked like he might nip a point, but ran wide at the restart. He fell 20 seconds behind Joe in last place, but you got to hand it to him. He erased a 20-second deficit and passed Joe for P14. So that was actually one of the better drives on the grid.
That was
if
pretty
you consider
good.
it. 20 seconds, that's pretty good. He did radio it. He said his back was killing him. He was in a lot of pain from all the bumps, and so that just tells you that car was stiff. Those bumps are there. Very difficult for him. He said, "I'll finish it for the team, but it's killing me." Yeah,
get me some aspirin for crying out loud when I get out of here. But yeah.
Does anybody have some Aleve? Advil? Anything? Give me 3 fingers of red eye and a water back. That's how Fernando rolls.
Yep.
Let's see. What are we down to? Williams? Yes, we are. We got Williams. We got Alex Albon did not start. Why? Because he crashed his car in qualifying. The team couldn't put it back together again before the race.
Yes. Expensive weekend for these guys.
Very. Franco Colapinto, DNF, because he crashed heavily behind safety car. So both
he also
cars
crashed in qualifying.
In quali, yeah. Both cars crashed in quali. Team couldn't repair Alex's in time for the race. And that makes me wonder, Paul, what kind of resources they have when Aston repaired both of theirs. And is Carlos aware of the lack of resources that might see him not have a tub or a chassis available for the race if it's wrecked, or couldn't put the car back? I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Well, I think the damage levels are quite different. I mean, you look closer at Albon's.
I'm being harsh.
That was you are being harsh.
Yeah,
I think the whole back half of that car needs to be fixed.
Yeah, he rode it off.
Yeah, I mean the Alonso and the Stroll crashes were damage, but not repairable damage. And it was
Alex's was kind of all 4 corners, right?
It was. I mean, the tub. Yeah. I mean, the whole engine, everything had to come put together.
There's a lot of work.
it was a lot of work. So I don't think it was resources. I'm not saying Williams had the resources that they could have done it, but they probably, they had quite a bit to work to do to Colapinto's car as well. And I think they just chose the one that was more likely to make the grid. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But in the end, Colapinto's looked worse than Alex's.
Oof, yeah.
In that race, it looked bad.
That is not what they want to go to the next race with. That's painful for them.
Pretty tough. So, I'm just saying, what's it going to take to put those two cars back together, Paul? It's going to take 100 hours. Give me 100 mechanics for an hour and it's done.
Logic.
Project management. Yeah, it's all project management theory. So anyway, it doesn't work that way. All right, let's give out some awards because we typically do that. The first one is Move of the Race. Woo! Oh, yeah.
We'll do it live.
Yes, Move of the Race. What do you got, Paul?
I'm giving it to the stay out till the red flag pit call. I mean, you may as well. They didn't have a lot to lose, and it ended up coming up like roses. I'm not saying the other teams made an error, but this one made a pivotal difference in the race, and certainly for the Alpine cars.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. My move of the race, no DRS for the whole race.
Ooh, that should be plauded.
Yes. No DRS for the whole damn race, and I enjoyed it. They had to wait for mistakes, and they had to force those passes. They had to dive down to the inside, and people ran a little wide, and they were hunting for grip, and it just made for a super exciting race, and I loved it because the passes were all genuine, and nobody was sitting around, well, I'll just wait to the straight and get him in DRS. They were trying them down in 1 and 3 and 4, and they were trying passes, and that's old school, and I loved it. So
that's why we don't like DRS.
That's exactly why we don't like it. All right, next award is one of the all-time favorites. It's the Donkey of the Race.
Stop yelling at Todd.
Don't yell at me. It's not my fault. I win the Donkey of the Race. Paul, who'd you pick?
Well, unfortunately, I got to pick Lance.
I want it now! What's the matter with those twats?
Hopefully I don't get a call for Lawrence or anything, but I don't think he listens.
Larry's going to call you. Who the hell's this Charsley? Who the hell's this Paul?
Get rid of him.
Paul Ferradura Charsley. Who the hell's that? Oh, God.
Off with him.
Off with his head. Yes. Make him go away.
But that's it. I think there's a few different extenuated circumstances, but even so, that's a tough one.
Tough. That's a tough one to deal. Yeah, I could go with Williams too, but that's a tough one. I had Lance too. And then finally, we got to drive the race. I mean, what are you gonna do?
Get in there, Lewis. Get in there, Lewis.
Yeah. Get in there, Lewis. Lewis wasn't in there at all.
No, he wasn't. He's not driver of the race at all.
No, he's not driver of the race at all. Driver of the race is Max, I think.
Yep. How do you not?
Exceptional performance. Yeah.
Yep. One of the best, certainly right up there with a lot of great drives. So they were comparing it to really Senna's first lap. I wouldn't say it's too far off. He did, but Senna was racing against the top cars and getting by them. But either way, some definite identifiers there with just doing things way different than everyone else and getting a different result, which meant moving ahead of everybody. So great drive.
I mean, and I'm a Ferrari fan, but you got to hint it. That is not the fastest car on the grid.
No.
And I realize people love to, take the stuffing out of Max, but he's an exceptional driver. I watched that, it smacks of, when was it, Paul? Schumacher, Spain, 98? 96?
Driving in fifth gear?
Yeah, just drove through the whole damn field in the wet. It was torrential downpour. He just annihilated the entire field.
Yep.
And it kind of where he got his
Man amongst boys
Rainmeister.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was like, holy cow.
Yeah, for sure.
But that kind of reminds me, it's one of those standout performances. You can hate him all you want. You cannot like his personality. You cannot like the team and all that stuff. But he's an exceptionally smart driver. Mm-hmm. just incredible to watch. And I'm like all of them. I saw Schumacher race and all his career, and I've seen them all for years. And I'm just honored to have seen Lewis race, to see Vettel race, to see Max race. It's just a privilege. I love them all. They're great.
It is. And one thing, just because I was riding around with Max so long in his info camera, he gets a lot of information. He wasn't doing a lot of talking back, but he gets a lot of information that he's soaking in. And I think on the engineering side, I think they've got that figured out, that cross of information right. And it seems like, he doesn't get upset if he's giving information in a corner or anything like that. He's well within his scheme to take up. So, he did a phenomenal job, and his backup team also did a phenomenal job this week.
Yeah, and I've said this on the podcast, but that's kind of what Adrian knew. He said the real champions like Max, his capacity in his mind is so far beyond what his mind's having to do to actually drive in the race. So he's in the heat of anger in the race, but his brain can take in so much more.
Right. He drives at the limit of the car, but not his limit.
Exactly.
That's what the Sennas and
I think
all those people.
Sennas, Schumachers, all of them did that. Right. Exactly. So I think that's very true. So anyway, but let us know what you think about the Grand Prix and how you saw the Grand Prix and the penalties and the chaos and all of that good stuff. You can do that by going to theparkferme.com. Share your opinion. Just do it to Corman Civility. If you like the podcast, go to your favorite podcast player. Give us a good rating. Give us some love over there. And a huge, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we could not and would not do this podcast without you. We've got a few weeks, Paul, before Las Vegas, so I'll give you a much-needed break. But then we're back on. We're back on triple header. Right?
Triple header to finish off the season?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, man.
It's going to be hammer and tongs for the balance of the season. So, prepare yourself.
Okay.
But I'll go find Grace for next week. We'll get her thoughts on everything that's going on. And I am sure.
Can't wait to see her new outfit.
I can't either. And I'm sure Grace is going to have a lot to share with all of you about MotoGP. So I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about that. So until next weekend, when we come back and do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.